So we're going to kick off the morning. Because this conference is in Tacoma, frankly, because it's our conference, we bookended the event with two people who are not in real estate, who work in peripheral fields, who have really interesting experience that we think you guys will enjoy hearing from. So Jaclyn Ruckle is somebody that I met almost 20 years ago. We worked in retail together. I was in college and she was in high school, already a budding power lady. And she now manages social media for REI, which if you're from the Northwest means something to you. They have a brilliant social media campaign. They're a very, very successful company. If you're from other parts of the country, I hope you've at least heard of REI.
You might know them as the company that told everybody not to come in on Black Friday and to go camping instead.
So Jaclyn's going to talk to us, and I think you guys will get a ton out of her presentation. Please welcome Jaclyn Ruckle. Your clicker is here. I'll track you.
Okay. You guys look good. I'm used to speaking to a lot of people in down and flannel, and if you didn't know, you guys look good this morning. So I don't know if I can keep up with the Anna Marguerite show, but let's give a clap for our hosts. What a fun way to start a Thursday. It's so beautiful, and I love talking about the internet, and I love meeting people, and I have a good profession because those two things come together. So I'm really excited to talk with you this morning about maintaining relationships in the outdoor community. And Ann and I were talking about what I should, share with you guys today. And I'm just going to talk to you like I talk to my team at work and talk about things we're learning. And I love to be a student of brands, and I love to be a student of marketing. And so I wish I was sitting here with you guys all day to keep learning in the conversation, but excited for these few minutes we have together now. So we're going to ground ourselves in some industry talk. So I know it's meaty first thing in the morning, but you guys look like you're ready for it. Social moves so fast, and it's an exciting place to be. Bye. Okay, I'll keep talking. Oh, thank you. Everybody, so helpful. So I think the first thing I just want to share are things that we're talking about, at REI, and one of those is being intentional about a channel focus. So social has a different purpose and benefit than email. One of the things we're talking about is being intentional about what we're trying to accomplish in each of those channels, which might sound obvious, but all of the networks are innovating and ideating at the top and the bottom of the funnel. So you can have, as a retailer, you could have a whole focus on social that's just about direct response, about calls to action to shop, or there's things at the top of the funnel that are happening that are engagement and fun, and all the networks are innovating in both of those directions. It's important to think about the intentionality of the channel and that all those things can be different. Email and social are my two favorites to pit against each other. Email's becoming more mature, but we're not like the graduate program of email, That's an impressively established marketing channel. The other thing worth mentioning is because we're all consumers of social, it's easy to forget that social has really become a paid channel. When I look at how much social has changed, I've spent a decade doing PR and have focused on social marketing for the last 3 years at REI. The amount of investment and return and opportunity, we're putting money behind what we put in social because the caliber of the content, the copy, and the power of the channel to engage people matters. And so the organic things we test into or unfunded things without working media dollars are intentional because we know eventually our social platforms are going to sell us those places. Instagram stories, Facebook Live, things like that. Last but not least, in the context of building community, just want to mention that social is a powerful targeting tool. And I'm sure all of you are smart and sharp and dabble and to different degrees in social marketing. But when I'm in the business of selling the outdoors, I have a really powerful tool in social to be intentional about the demographics, the behavior, and the interest, just because we as everyday people tell the network so much about ourselves. Next, please. Okay, so transitioning to an overlay of what community means. There's three things that matter, and then I'm going to go to some screenshots and look at brands because I just love to learn from other people, and we'll talk about REI a little bit too. But when you really think about it, the bottom and the most fundamental thing is taking care of people, right? You start a conversation. There's an important layer of just paying attention to the conversation you've started. For me, that's a lot of customer service. It's kind of the unsexy part of social sometimes, but that one-to-one interaction is how we build trust with people. The second thing is like content's like the hottest commodity word. You could have like a drinking game with content at any marketing conference and not make it very long, because content is just like what everyone's talking about with content marketing. But that's an important part of being intentional about the content that you're creating in the community you're trying to build. And last but not least is conversation. We are a two-way channel. When we send emails, no one replies all to our millions of members. People give us instant feedback, and I'll give you an example of how we're learning into that all the time. Keeps a lady humble. So I don't know if you guys have followed Dove and their Real Beauty campaign, but I'm going to go through a little bit of conversation, care, and content and just show some examples from brands that I really admire. The short context here is few brands cut through and really have a big, meaningful conversation with people. I would say Dove is one of those companies that maybe doesn't sell the most exciting product. I don't know if I wake up really passionate about like soap. But they have found a way to make it meaningful based on something very common to the human experience, which is just being, everyone has a different level of insecurity or ways they talk about themselves. So they've had a consistent, 10-year brand campaign, like Rochelle, has it been about 10 years? Dev's been doing this stuff, I don't know, she'll keep me honest. But one of the last things they did, my point being, you can start a big conversation, but it's that one-to-one interaction that's meaningful. So in this example, at South by Southwest, I was at a launch event where Dove created a special tool with Twitter that does a sentiment analysis of how you speak about yourself on the internet. And it fed it back to you if you plugged in your information, told you the day and the time that you're most positive and most negative about yourself, talked about the words you most frequently use. It was this awareness driver to talk about self-esteem and meaning and help change a conversation about beauty. That's really powerful. And when you think about building a community, I don't think about building a community around soap, but you can build a community around women and men who rally together to have meaning in that. The other thing, can I go back for a second? Am I doing okay on time, Ann Jones? Okay. The other thing I just want to mention, Marguerite teed up what REI has been talking about with Opt Outside. We started a big conversation about standing against consumerism last year, and we're continuing that conversation this year. I hope all of you will go outside, even if it's a walk around the park. Don't shop, come hang out with us. But what that comes down for a lot of work with my team is a lot of one-to-one interaction. So I handpicked one of our tweets. This woman talks about after an Alabama Thanksgiving, I need some exercise. And my community managers in there, bantering back and forth about turkey sandwiches to go. And this is a GIF with smiles ahead. Even though we're having this big conversation and it's, won awards last year, it's still that one-to-one interaction that matters. I also really admire Chipotle, which might seem like a funny example, but I admire brands that can be so disciplined and really understanding who they're trying to talk about. They just are funny. They get their customer, they find a way to make food and things relevant all the time, and it makes me laugh, it's entertaining. So finally, getting some quality meat time was my example of knowing your community and giving them entertaining content to get along. If you need to entertain yourself, check out their Instagram account, it's a good skim. The other one, REI's Instagram account, just I know everybody, do you ever love Instagram? Is that your favorite? No? Yes? No? Okay. I think it's kind of like the darling of the internet right now. It's kind of the favorite child. One thing that is really wonderful is that a team ahead of me started a strategy on Instagram that was really community focused. And believe it or not, people love to go outside and love to take photos of themselves. The reason I handpicked this one as an example is that we don't usually, hey, trade ya, thanks. We don't usually post selfies of people, right? Sometimes that's not very interesting. But one of the tactics we've had in terms of building community engagement with outdoor enthusiasts is weekend projects, which stems from a native behavior on Instagram. But we're asking our community to play along with us with different themes. And this was our Summit Selfie series, or Summer Summit series where we did, and people played along, and you get to the top of a mountain like that, you're gonna get a selfie on REI's Instagram account. We're gonna reward that. Ooh. Okay. Back one. Trying one, or I can skip. I can start to the humble part. Okay. A note to care. How many people followed the Starbucks cup drama? I picked a recent event, right? Maybe there were bigger things to care about last week, but this is kind of what happened at Starbucks last week. And every time this happens, every social manager is ooh, that's a big day. There's camaraderie, there's no judgment. It's just that's a tough day. But my headline being like part of caring for people is like Starbucks is so big, you could have a point of view that they're too big to fail. You could have that point of view, but their social team like gets in there and like interacts with people, and like I've protected the names of the innocent with a black bar. But basically this gentleman up here has said like, hey Starbucks, I heard this rumor, is it true? I heard this rumor, is it true? And their community engagement team just killed me, and they're like, nope, not true. Just funny, one-to-one interaction, but they're addressing things head on, and then they do lots of smart things at Starbucks where they have a story about, the intentionality behind this green cup. Just in terms of starting conversations and interacting with people, that one-to-one care matters. And my last example is on a humble note. When you build a community of people that really know what they're talking about, including the outdoors, they're going to course correct you every once in a while, and I would say social marketing keeps me very humble. Although I happen to be the talent in this hammock photo, you may not recognize those calves and feet. That is yours truly. In some REI content, I know, I'll sign autographs later. However, we made a quick error, and we corrected it, but we said over there that when you hammock, it's a best practice to hang your hammock 18 inches off the ground. Has anyone hung a hammock 18 inches off the ground before? Your tush is on the ground. You're right, it's not ideal. So we put this content out there. People are like, hey, REI, that's kind of dumb. You need to hang it higher than that. And we're like camping experts, right? So, yeah. The punchline being, we watched this conversation unfold. I'm of an opinion that it's smarmy to just delete something because people call you out on being silly. The way ads run, it's only on the internet for like a day. It's no permanent damage, right? But I talked with my community manager and I was like, hey, we need to respond to someone because we did make a mistake. We're not gonna delete it, but let's keep a record. So this guy crafted a really careful response, which you may or may not be able to read, but the punchline is, you are correct. We did not intend to say that, and we're glad you didn't sit on the ground in air while, we correct our mistake. And he quotes Tupac, I ain't mad at ya. I mean, what's not to love about that? So, all that to be said, building an outdoor community is so much fun, and the interaction of it is an exciting place to be. I know the communities you're involved with and building are different than the one I am, but it's such an exciting place to be. Good question. It varies depending on the integrity of the content and what we're trying to achieve with it, but I would say we don't usually run anything less than like a day or two.
I'm wondering, when you, so say that ad, your response time, you have a team of how many?
I manage 6 people.
Okay, and so when you run like the hammock ad, for example, at what point did you realize it was going wrong, and how quickly did you correct it? Because I think this is something we can really learn from, which is when you put something out there, you don't just leave it. You've got to pay attention, interact, adjust.
Yeah. So I would say it's always, the order of operations varies depending on what's happening. Like it's triage, right? Like it's not really like people in like physical harm, but like it's a little bit of the variables for every issue that comes up. And we have lots of issues that come up. So I would say in this particular case, the important part was we course corrected with our content team. And we were like, hey, well, let's just like fix this and repost it. And the integrity of it was really to live on Pinterest. But Facebook had just lifted a 20% text rule. So we're like, let's try it out. And so there were a few things we learned into that. And so we have a really like iron stomach for testing and learning and critique. It's not going to keep us from coming back to work the next day. But the important part to me was that we addressed it. We made a mistake and we acknowledged it in a fun way. And just to your point about like how we handle things, brands get really long comment threads. Like people have got a lot of time. I make good money watching people spend a lot of time share their thoughts and feelings with us, and there's an art to picking one of the comments that's kind of neutral and acknowledging it back. So like the guy that we picked wasn't like telling us we were super stupid. He just was like, hey, I think you're wrong. And then he quoted Tupac, and it was great.
Yeah. Well, so and along those lines, when you're creating content, because you're really familiar, so REI I think has 1.3 million followers on Instagram. How are you creating your content with the different channels in mind? I think this is a challenge that a lot of us are facing now, right? As you've got the rise of Instagram stories versus Snapchat, and you're looking at all of these different. Do you create unique content for each channel?
Good question. I would say we're working to be sharper in terms of content running like different places. We don't run everything in the same place. Like, for example, the long form of Pinterest is intended to be traffic driving over time. That comes back to, expert advice and things that are kind of evergreen that people search for and have demand all the time. We're testing into, shorter form content where the integrity of it is to entertain and have a short shelf life.
So that would be like Instagram stories and Snapchat?
Yeah, that's like the shortest of short life. That's like the shortest.
Yeah.
Drawing from Starbucks, they actually revealed their red cup in an Instagram stories yesterday, which depending on when they did it, you can't even see it now. It's kind of funny. You just can't.
Yeah. Sorry, I took over the questions. Go for it, Kylie.
How do you know, when is a good time to post something? Knowing that people are going to be looking at it because it does go away so quickly.
Good question. The algorithms for the platforms change all the time. It's a black box and one of the biggest thorns in my professional side. Facebook's not very transparent about how they change things. We do have tools and different managers and different, we probably have really sophisticated stuff that not everybody has, but we can tell optimal times for engagement. So for example, at one time, commute times were really popular for us, like drive in, drive home. Depending on what we're trying to accomplish, we'll look at what engagement looks like, but it can change week to week.
Andrea.
I think one of the things over the last couple of days I've noticed, and I've always noticed it over time, when things are happening in the world, do you alter your campaigns or pull something at the last minute based on what's going on in the world?
Yes. So part of what I'm in the business of is brand reputation and trying not to show up and look tone deaf to the world, right? So there's a real scenario where we could live in an outdoor snow globe and only care about what's happening in the outdoor industry and people who are real dirtbags and climb all the time and all of that, but it's really important that part of our team is not being insensitive to things that are happening. We don't publish on 9/11. We didn't publish on Election Day, and we paused yesterday too. And a lot of those calls are impromptu, but it is super important to be mindful to what matters and looking just a little tasteless, even if it's just a simple outdoor photo. If you don't have something to contribute to the conversation, don't say anything.
Well, and I think that's that's going to dovetail into Kendall's talking later about that space between being an individual. It's okay, you're on your phone. It's fine. But being an individual, being a team, being a brand, being a company, and I think that's a great example of how a company can have a soul, can have a personality, that shows respect, it shows an acknowledgement of what's important to the community that it serves. So it's a really, really good example. How are we doing on time? One thing I wanted to mention, anybody who's watched any of the videos that Marguerite and I make together, you guys will know that Jaclyn's a frequent, has cameos in our videos. Rochelle's also here. And the reason I wanted to mention that...
On top of a person.
Yeah, there was
a
a double-decker plank pose that happened in one of our videos. But I want to mention it because we have benefited tremendously from their input and expertise. They're outside of our industry. They give us their unfiltered opinion. And if you're lucky enough to have someone near you, or maybe you need to go seek somebody out, but we tend to be so insulated, right? We tend to learn from our real estate gurus. We are interacting with each other all the time. Getting a little further out and finding some of these companies to cue into that you really respect and admire, and then maybe, ideally, forming a relationship with someone there.
Are you saying to hashtag opt outside your industry?
I see what you did there. It's clever. I like it.
Don't you have a job for her? You can have her.
Kind of hot. It's warm up here.
So, any other questions for Jaclyn?
Oh my gosh, I love a hashtag question. I'm so glad somebody asked a hashtag question. This is great.
Jaclyn's hashtag is ladies of ripped, just for the record.
Oh, Anne, you make me sound like I do so much more fitness than I do. So I would say that I'm serious when I say we try to be very intentional about building equity and hashtags over time. So when I think about, I didn't mention it today, but we had a campaign called Every Trail Connects. And it was a conversation, not every trail literally connects, but there's a lot of metaphors to be drawn from that. We've had a conversation about inside, outside, about united outside, left side, right side, united outside. I'll get it right. And in the context of the tumultuous, political landscape that we live in right now, that was part of our campaign when we launched our DC flagship. So the punchline being, we pick a few and make them meaningful, as opposed to just use them to raise our hand and look like we're trying to be in every conversation. We're in a place where we're trying to lead conversations. And then if we pick up like partner tags or things that are trending, we're mindful about what they're tied to. So things can look straightforward, but when you like click in and go down the rabbit hole of hashtag tracking, there can be some really weird stuff you inadvertently attach your brand to. And that's just a good like guardrail to keep in mind as you think about what hashtags you associate yourself with.
We ran into that with a hashtag Tacoma hustle. For the record.
Use it anyway.
More questions for Jaclyn.
So a lot of us are working with smaller businesses, and how do you understand your customers, your clients, in order to decide what content to post?
Can you repeat that question back?
If I had to summarize it in my best journalistic summarization, I would say, how do you deliver content your community wants to have? Yeah, really good question. I would say there are some free social listening tools, depending on what you're trying to do. At the risk of sounding like there's a blend of art and science and all marketing, I would say one of the things I wanted to say, which is now my excuse to say it, is like, don't be afraid to test and learn into things and see what resonates. So with discipline and measure, you can be focused, but there's also a place for testing into things and not being afraid of what I call smart fail. So say you branch out into something else and it doesn't get a lot of engagement, like that's just one thing, like move on to another thing and don't worry about it. But you can help train your community to what you're gonna be good at. Like one day, Ann Jones Instagrammed, like my mom's beautiful craftsman, and I was like, Ann Jones, my mom summited your Instagram account, and she doesn't even know how cool it is, but she does, And that's like a stream that Anne has created. But I think, you can have main streams that you do, and then like dabble with other things, so you have some consistency and then some flair.
Greg Fisher's actually going to talk later today about identifying who you are marketing to, how you create that profile.
I've never used a social listening tool. Like, do I just Google social listening tools? Maybe free social listening tools? Like, how do you find a social listening tool to listen?
I'm going to sound like a really arrogant brand marketer. Like, we pay for them. I would say this is like really old school. I don't know if it's still around, so don't take my like professional endorsement of it. But there was a tool called Ice Rocket out there a while ago. I think it's Ice Rocket. So if something inappropriate comes up, it is not my fault. However, at one point in time, like maybe 2008, Jaclyn Ruckle was using that tool to just see you can do some social listening, and it's light, and you may or may not find it helpful, but free.
Okay, we are going to work hard to stay on schedule. So Jaclyn will have to go back to work at some point. If you have the opportunity, what's your Instagram handle?
Ruckle, Ruckle.
You guys should check her out, and can we please give her a big round of applause?
Great.